Nobody on Outpost Theta believed the recordings at first. The station sat deep inside the black waters of the Vantros Rift, a dead region of space where even military scanners behaved strangely. Cargo routes avoided it. Exploration ships disappeared there often enough that insurers stopped paying compensation decades ago. The official explanation blamed unstable gravity currents. The unofficial explanation was worse. Something lived in the rift. Commander Elias Ward hated ghost stories. Humanity had crossed hundreds of galaxies, fought wars against machine empires, survived plagues engineered by alien civilizations, and colonized worlds where rain could melt steel. Humans did not fear shadows. But shadows were exactly what waited outside Theta Station. The distress call arrived at 3:14 station time. Not from a ship. From the surface below. Every person in the command center froze when the ancient transmission crackled through the speakers. "Please, somebody answer." The voice sounded human. That was impossible. Planet LV-426 beneath the station had been declared uninhabitable 200 years earlier after an entire research colony vanished in one night. No bodies. No wreckage. Just silence. Elias stared at the waveform on the screen while static hissed through the room. Then the voice returned. "They're inside the walls." The transmission ended. Nobody moved for several seconds. Lieutenant Mirachin slowly looked toward Elias. "Sir, that signal originated from the colony ruins." "Could be an automated loop," someone whispered. "No," Mira replied quietly. "It's live." The room became colder after that. Not physically. Mentally. Every crew member on Theta knew the history of LV-426. Children in human space still told stories about it. Entire documentaries had been banned after causing panic attacks in viewers. The colony had housed nearly 12,000 people. Scientists. Engineers. Families. Then every communication stopped. 3 rescue fleets entered orbit afterward. Only one returned. And the survivors had ripped out their own eyes before their ship reached civilized space. Official records buried the incident. Humanity moved on. But Theta Station remained above the planet for one reason. To make sure nothing ever left. Elias finally spoke. "Prepare a surface team." Half the room looked horrified. Mira frowned. "Sir, with respect, regulations forbid planetary descent. Regulations also forbid ignoring active human distress signals." Silence. Nobody argued after that. Because humanity had another rule older than fear itself. You never leave your own behind. 2 hours later, the dropship descended through poisonous clouds toward the dead colony. Rain hammered the hull hard enough to sound like gunfire. Lightning illuminated endless black mountains below. The entire world looked rotten. Even from the sky, the ruins felt wrong, like the planet itself hated being observed. Elias sat near the loading ramp checking his pulse rifle for the 3rd time. Across from him, Mira tried to hide shaking hands while adjusting scanner equipment. Beside her sat Corporal Dane, the largest Marine on Theta Station. He usually joked before missions. Usually smiled. Now he stared silently at the floor. Only the android, Ki-7, appeared calm. Synthetic humans unsettled most people. Ki moved too precisely, spoke too evenly, and blinked slightly slower than normal humans. But Elias trusted him more than machines were supposed to be trusted. Ki suddenly tilted his head. "I am detecting movement beneath the dropship." Dane immediately stood. "Beneath us?" "There is nothing on external visual feeds," Kai replied. "But thermal readings indicate multiple heat signatures moving along the canyon walls." "How many?" Mira asked. Ki paused. "Unknown. They are disappearing intermittently." Nobody liked that answer. The dropship shook violently. Warning alarms flashed red. "Crosswinds," the pilot shouted. "Hold on." The ship dropped hard through storm clouds before stabilizing barely 50 meters above the colony ruins. Everyone saw it then. The city, or what remained of it. Massive research towers leaned sideways like broken teeth. Streets vanished beneath strange black growths spreading across buildings. Thousands of empty windows stared upward into the storm. No lights. No movement. No signs of life. And yet Elias could not shake the feeling that the colony was watching them. The dropship landed heavily near the Central Administration Complex. Surface contact confirmed, the pilot said nervously. I strongly recommend we do not stay long. Noted, Elias answered. The ramp lowered slowly. Cold air rushed inside carrying the smell of wet metal and something worse underneath. Something organic. Dane muttered quietly, I already hate this planet. The team stepped into the ruins. Rain poured across cracked streets while distant thunder rolled over dead skyscrapers. Every sound echoed strangely. Even footsteps felt muffled. Mira activated her scanner. Signal source is 2 kilometers east. Underground levels. Movement? Elias asked. She checked again. No life signs. Ki looked toward a nearby alleyway. Incorrect. Everyone raised weapons instantly. What did you see? Elias snapped. The android stared into darkness for several long seconds. Then he answered softly. A face. Lightning flashed. For the briefest moment something pale moved between buildings. Not running. Watching. Dane fired immediately. Pulse rounds exploded through concrete walls, but the alley was empty when they reached it. Only darkness remained. Mira swallowed hard. Tell me somebody else saw that. Nobody answered. Because they had all seen it. Human. So unnaturally thin. And smiling. The team continued deeper into the colony while rain flooded abandoned streets around them. Every building showed signs of violence. Doors bent outward. Barricades shattered from the inside. Burn marks covered entire intersections. Whatever happened here had not been sudden. People had fought to survive. And lost. Elias stopped beside a transport vehicle overturned near the road. Deep claw marks covered the metal. Not scratches. Gouges. Dane crouched nearby examining them. No known animal makes marks like these. Kai scanned the damage silently. Then the android said something that made everyone uncomfortable. These were not made by an animal. Thunder cracked overhead again. Far away, somewhere deep inside the ruins, something screamed. Not human. Not animal either. The sound echoed across the dead city like metal being torn apart. Underwater. Mira nearly dropped her scanner. What the hell was that? Nobody knew. But after the scream ended, lights began appearing inside buildings all across the colony. One by one. Windows flickered alive in distant towers. Hallways illuminated beneath shattered streets. Street lamps sparked weakly through heavy rain. The dead colony was waking up. Dane stepped backward slowly. Sir, you tell me you're seeing this. Elias stared at the glowing city in disbelief. There shouldn't be power. Ki's emotionless voice cut through the storm. We are no longer alone. The lights continued spreading through the colony like blood moving through veins. Entire streets flickered alive one section at a time while rain poured across broken towers. Somewhere beneath the city, ancient generators groaned back to life after 2 centuries of silence. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. This mission just changed, he said quietly. We get the source of that distress signal and leave immediately. Nobody argued. Even Dane, who normally challenged every order, stayed silent while scanning rooftops above them. Because they all felt it now. The colony was not abandoned. Something moved behind the glowing windows. Sometimes a shadow crossed the light for half a second before vanishing again. Sometimes figures appeared standing motionless inside buildings several floors high. Watching. Never approaching. Mira tried to focus on her scanner, but her breathing kept getting faster. Signal is below the medical district. About 800 meters. Then move. The team advanced through flooded streets while thunder shook the ruins overhead. The deeper they went, the stranger the city became. Vehicles remained parked in perfect rows as if their owners had vanished mid-evacuation. Cafes still contained untouched cups on tables. Children's toys floated through rainwater near apartment entrances. It looked less like a destroyed colony and more like time itself had stopped. Then they found the bodies. Or pieces of them. Dane halted first. Oh God! Half buried beneath rubble near a transit station lay a human skeleton still wearing fragments of a colony security uniform. Deep cracks covered the bones as though enormous pressure had crushed the person from the inside. More remains appeared nearby. Dozens. Some fused into walls. Others twisted into shapes human bodies should never form. Mira turned away immediately. What could do this? Kai knelt beside one skeleton, studying it carefully. These deaths did not occur simultaneously. Elias frowned. Meaning, the colony did not fall in one night. Everyone looked at him. The android stood slowly. These people died over a prolonged period. Weeks, possibly months. A cold silence followed. That contradicted every official report. The colony had supposedly gone silent within hours. But the evidence surrounding them told a different story. The colonists had been trapped here. Hunted. Dane suddenly raised his rifle toward a nearby building. Movement. A pale figure stood behind shattered glass on the third floor. Human-shaped. Too tall. Its head tilted unnaturally sideways while staring directly at them. Mira whispered, "Please tell me that's a survivor." The figure smiled wider. Then disappeared backward into darkness. Dane fired again. Pulse rounds shattered windows across the building, but when they searched the interior moments later, they found nothing. No footprints. No heat signatures. Only wet corridors and walls covered in strange black veins pulsing faintly beneath the surface. Mira touched one accidentally. To move. She jerked back with a scream. The growth retreated into the wall like living muscle. "What the hell is this?" she gasped. Ki scanned the substance. Unknown organic structure. It appears connected throughout the colony. Elias looked around slowly. The black veins covered nearly every nearby surface now that he noticed them. Streets. Ceilings. Vehicles. Like some gigantic organism had grown beneath the city itself. A distant metallic sound echoed through the building. Clang. 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 Footsteps. Heavy ones. The team froze. The noise came from somewhere below them. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. Dane aimed toward the dark stairwell. Contact below. The footsteps stopped instantly. Complete silence followed. Then something began climbing the stairs fast. Too fast. The sound exploded upward through the building with horrifying speed. Everyone opened fire together. Pulse rifles lit the stairwell blue while deafening gunfire echoed through tight corridors. Something screamed inside the darkness. A shape slammed into the ceiling so hard concrete cracked apart. Mira only saw pieces of it. Long arms. Wet black skin. A human face stretched across something far too large. Then it vanished back into the lower floors. Silence returned. Dane stared downward, breathing hard. What in God's name was that? Nobody answered. Because none of them understood what they had just seen. Kai suddenly spoke. "There are multiple movement signatures approaching the building." "How many?" The android paused. "More than 50. Elias swore immediately. "Move. Now." The team sprinted from the structure seconds before shapes began appearing behind windows above them. Dozens of them. Tall silhouettes crawling across ceilings and walls in impossible ways. Some still looked partially human. Others clearly did not. Mira ran through heavy rain while checking the scanner. Medical district entrance ahead. A massive hospital complex emerged through the storm, its upper levels dark except for one blinking emergency beacon near the roof. The front doors stood open. That alone felt wrong. As the team approached, Elias noticed words carved repeatedly into the metal walls beside the entrance. "Do not sleep." The message appeared hundreds of times. Written in blood. Dane stared at it uneasily. "Yeah, that's comforting." Inside, the hospital remained powered. Dim emergency lights flickered across abandoned hallways stained black with old blood. Medical beds still lined corridors. Some restraints remained locked around empty mattresses. The smell inside was unbearable. Rot mixed with chemicals and something sweet underneath. Mira covered her mouth. People lived in here after the collapse. Kai nodded. For a considerable time. The distress signal guided them downward through increasingly damaged levels until they reached a massive underground quarantine sector. Blast doors hung partially open. Deep claw marks covered the steel. Beyond them lay darkness. Elias activated his shoulder L. But rows of containment cells stretched endlessly through the underground chamber. Most doors had been ripped apart from the inside. Inside one cell they found writing covering every wall. They mimic us. Another cell repeated a different message. Don't trust the voices. Then they reached the final chamber. Unlike the others, this cell remained sealed. Power still flowed through its locking mechanisms. And someone was alive inside. A weak human voice crackled through the intercom. You shouldn't have come here. Mira rushed toward the control panel. We received your distress signal. We're getting you out. No, the voice shouted suddenly. Do not open this door. Elias stepped closer. Who are you? Several seconds passed before the answer came. Dr. Emilia Reyes, chief xenobiologist. The entire team exchanged shocked looks. Reyes had died 2 centuries ago according to official records. That's impossible, Mira whispered. I know how it sounds, the voice replied weakly. Listen carefully. The colony didn't fail because of disease or attack. We found something beneath the planet. The lights flickered. Far away in the darkness behind them came faint scraping sounds. More than one. Dr. Reyes continued speaking quickly. It learns from living minds. It copies fear, memories, voices, eventually bodies. We thought quarantine would stop it. A loud bang echoed somewhere deeper in the hospital. Then another. Something heavy was hitting the blast doors upstairs. Elias looked upward sharply. Reyes sounded terrified now. It wants to leave this world. That's why it called you here. The banging grew louder. Metal screamed somewhere above them. Dane raised his rifle toward the hallway. We've got incoming. Then the emergency lights died. Darkness swallowed the underground sector completely. And in the black silence around them, human voices began whispering from every direction at once. At first the whispers sounded distant, so almost harmless. Then Elias realized the voices were perfectly familiar. His dead brother calling his name. Myra's mother whispering in Mandarin beside her ear. Dane hearing an old military commander screaming battlefield orders from years ago. Every voice belonged to someone they knew. Someone impossible. Mira backed against the wall breathing hard. It's inside our comms. KAI answered immediately. Negative. The sound is organic. The darkness shifted. Something moved between the containment cells. Not one thing. Many. Elias activated a flare and red light flooded the corridor. Figures stood throughout the chamber now. Humans. Or shapes pretending to be human. Some wore colony uniforms. Others looked like children. Several had faces stretched wrong, smiling too wide beneath skin that twitched like liquid. None of them blinked. The whispers stopped all at once. Then every figure spoke together. You brought us home. Dane opened fire first. Pulse rounds tore bodies apart, but the creatures barely reacted. Limbs exploded into black fluid before reforming again. One crawled across the ceiling upside down using broken arms that bent backward like insect legs. The team retreated toward Dr. Reyes' sealed chamber while firing non-stop into the advancing swarm. KAI slammed the emergency controls beside the door. Containment breach imminent. The sealed chamber hissed open. Inside sat a woman wrapped in old thermal blankets beside flickering monitors powered by a portable reactor. She looked barely alive. Thin beyond reason. Gray hair hanging across hollow eyes. But the moment Elias saw her face, he understood she truly was Emilia Reyes. The famous scientist from the original colony. Still alive after 2 centuries. How? Mira gasped. Reyes laughed weakly. It keeps us alive when it needs us. The creatures slammed against the chamber entrance outside. Black hands reached through the partially closing blast door before Kai forced it shut completely. The impact shook the room. Fin. Dozens of things hammered the metal from outside. Reyes looked toward Elias urgently. Listen carefully. The organism beneath this planet isn't an animal. It's a neural predator. A hive intelligence older than humanity. You're saying the planet is alive? Dane asked. In a way. Another massive impact bent the blast door inward. Reyes continued quickly. It crashed here thousands of years ago. Buried deep underground. Dormant until we drilled into it searching for geothermal energy. Mira stared at the old scientist. What exactly does it do? Reyes looked terrified. It studies consciousness. The room fell silent except for the pounding outside. It enters the mind slowly, she continued. At first you hear voices. Then dreams stop feeling real. Eventually it learns everything about you. Every fear. Every memory. Every instinct. Another slam dented the door further inward. It can imitate humans perfectly after enough exposure. Elias suddenly remembered the smiling figure in the alley. The people watching from windows. The voices. How many colonists survived infection? Reyes looked away. None. Silence. Dane tightened his grip on the rifle. Then what are those things out there? The old scientist answered quietly. Copies. The blast door finally cracked down the middle. Black liquid seeped through the fracture. KAI immediately moved toward the reactor. We must evacuate. No, Reyes whispered. Everyone looked at her. She reached shakily toward an old terminal screen displaying underground geological maps. There's no evacuation anymore. The organism reached the station years ago. Elias froze. What? Reyes pulled up security footage. Theta Station appeared on the screen above the colony. People moved through corridors normally. Then the footage zoomed closer. Several crew members stood completely motionless in hallways facing security cameras. Watching. One slowly smiled. Mira stepped backward in horror. That recording, when was it taken? 3 weeks ago. The room became silent again. Elias felt cold spread through his chest. That meant the infection was already aboard Theta before they arrived. The distress signal had never been a call for help. It was bait. Something suddenly mimicked Elias' own voice from outside the chamber. Open the door. Then Myra's voice. We're trapped in here. Then Dane's. Please let us in. The creature had learned them already. The blast door bent inward violently as claws punched through the steel. Kai aimed his weapon. Commander, immediate action is required. Reyes stood slowly despite her shaking legs. There's one chance left. Deep beneath the colony is the original impact crater where the organism sleeps. Destroy the core intelligence and the copies die with it. And if we fail? Mira asked. Reyes looked directly at her. It reaches Earth. Nobody spoke after that, because every human alive understood what would happen if something capable of perfectly imitating people reached civilization. Entire worlds would disappear before anyone realized infection had begun. The chamber lights suddenly flickered red. Kai turned sharply toward the ceiling. Warning! Multiple life forms entering ventilation systems. A scratching sound echoed above them. Fast movement. Too much movement. Dane cursed. They're inside the walls. The vent directly overhead exploded downward. A creature crashed onto the floor. Once human, now horribly stretched into something spider-like with elongated limbs and wet black skin splitting apart around its face. Its jaw opened far too wide. Inside were human teeth. Hundreds of them. Everyone fired simultaneously. The thing screamed with voices overlapping inside its throat while bullets ripped chunks from its body. But more creatures poured from the vents immediately after. The chamber became chaos. One leapt onto Dane, smashing him into medical equipment hard enough to crack steel. Another mimicked a crying child while sprinting across the ceiling toward Mira. Kai moved with brutal precision, tearing one creature apart bare-handed while unloading pulse fire into the others. Elias grabbed Reyes and forced her toward the rear exit. This way. The old scientist shook her head violently. No. I can't leave. You're coming. I won't survive the descent. Reyes shoved a data drive into his hand. This contains everything we learned about the organism. Humanity must know. Another creature slammed into the room. Then another. The blast door finally collapsed completely. Dozens flooded the corridor outside. Reyes looked at Elias one final time. You humans are the first species it has ever feared. Before he could respond, she triggered the emergency lockdown controls. Massive steel barriers dropped between her and the team instantly. Elias slammed against the barrier. Reyes. The old scientist sat calmly beside the reactor while creatures surrounded her chamber from all sides. They survive by becoming what others fear, she said softly through the intercom. But humanity. A creature smashed through the ceiling behind her. Reyes smiled weakly. Humanity survives by refusing to die. Then she overloaded the reactor. White light consumed the chamber. The explosion tore through the underground sector like a miniature sun, vaporizing hundreds of creatures instantly while shockwaves hurled Elias and the others through the rear corridor. The team crashed hard into darkness beyond the quarantine sector. Dust rained from the ceiling. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Mira slowly lifted her head. We lost her. Kai looked upward into the collapsing hallway behind them. No, the android replied quietly. She bought us time. Emergency lights flickered weakly ahead, revealing a massive elevator descending deeper beneath the colony. Toward the crater. Toward the thing waiting below the planet. And somewhere far above them, Theta Station orbited silently in the dark. The elevator descended for nearly 20 minutes. Nobody spoke during the ride. The only sound came from old cables groaning above them while darkness swallowed the shaft beyond the weak emergency lights. Occasionally the platform shook as distant impacts echoed somewhere deep inside the planet. Something enormous moved below. Mira sat against the railing clutching her rifle tightly. Her hands still trembled after the quarantine breach. They knew our voices, she whispered finally. Our memories. Elias stared into the darkness beneath the platform. Reyes said it studies consciousness. That's not studying, Dane muttered. That's hunting. Kai stood motionless near the controls. Then the android said quietly, it is adapting. Everyone looked toward him. What do you mean? Elias asked. The creatures upstairs relied primarily on fear responses and mimicry. But during combat they altered tactics repeatedly after observing our behavior. Dane frowned. You're saying the damn thing learns while fighting? Yes. Nobody liked that answer. The elevator suddenly stopped with a violent jolt. Warning lights flashed red. Mira checked the depth display beside the controls and felt her stomach tighten. We're 7 kilometers underground. The doors slowly opened. Warm air rolled inside carrying a smell like rotting oceans. Beyond the platform stretched a gigantic cavern illuminated by strange blue organic light pulsing through the walls. The entire underground world looked alive. Massive black veins covered the stone like arteries, throbbing rhythmically beneath the surface. And in the center of the cavern stood the colony's final defensive line. Thousands of dead humans. Military barricades formed circles around the crater ahead. Burned tanks, shattered drones, collapsed railguns, and mountains of spent ammunition littered the cavern floor. The colonists had made their last stand here. And they had lost. Mira walked slowly past skeletons still gripping rifles. They fought all the way underground. Elias nodded grimly. They were trying to stop it from reaching the surface. Kai suddenly tilted his head. Audio detected. A faint voice echoed across the cavern. Crying. Human crying. Dane immediately raised his weapon. No chance. The crying grew louder. A little girl appeared near one of the barricades ahead. She looked about 8 years old, wearing dirty colony clothing and clutching a stuffed animal tightly against her chest. Tears rolled down her face. Please help me, she whispered. Mira froze. That's impossible. The child looked directly at Elias. They took my mommy. Dane aimed his rifle instantly. Don't get close to it. But the girl's expression changed suddenly. Her crying stopped. Slowly, unnaturally, her smile widened. Her jaw split open vertically down the middle. The stuffed animal in her arms unfolded into black tendrils lined with teeth. Everyone fired. The creature exploded apart before it could leap forward, spraying black fluid across the barricades. Silence returned immediately afterward. Mira looked sick. It used a child. Kai examined the remains. It used what would lower human defenses most efficiently. Dane spat on the ground. I'm officially done feeling bad about killing these things. The team advanced deeper toward the crater while more whispers echoed through the cavern around them. Sometimes the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Sometimes human faces briefly formed beneath the black organic growths before dissolving again. Then they reached the edge. The crater stretched nearly a kilometer wide beneath the underground cavern, a gigantic abyss descending into endless darkness. And something moved inside it. At first Elias thought it was machinery. Then the shape shifted. Massive black tendrils coiled upward through the pit like living roots thicker than buildings. Thousands of pale human-like bodies hung fused into the organic mass, twitching occasionally as though dreaming. Mira stared downward in horror. Dear God? The organism noticed them. Every fused body opened its eyes simultaneously. The cavern began shaking. A voice echoed directly inside their minds. Not heard. Felt. You are different. Elias nearly dropped to one knee from the pressure inside his skull. Images flooded his mind instantly. Dead worlds. Alien civilizations consumed beneath oceans of black flesh. Entire species copied until nothing original remained. The organism had done this before. Many times. You resist longer than others. The fused bodies along the crater walls began tearing themselves free from the mass. Hundreds of creatures climbed upward toward them. Dane opened fire immediately while screaming, "Contact front!" Battle erupted across the crater edge. Creatures poured from every direction now, no longer hiding or mimicking humanity. Their forms constantly shifted while charging forward. Some crawled like insects, others moved on too many limbs. Several still war fragments of human faces stretched across black bone structures underneath. Pulse rifles lit the cavern blue. Bodies exploded apart. Still the swarm kept coming. Ki ripped through two creatures with mechanical precision before another slammed into him from above. The android crashed into the barricades as claws tore deep grooves across his metal frame. Mira fired non-stop while retreating backward. There's too many. The organism's voice filled their minds again. Images flooded Elias' thoughts once more. Hisarth. Human cities. Millions of people smiling with empty black eyes. The future waiting if they failed. Then something changed. The organism hesitated. For the first time since entering the cavern, Elias felt uncertainty from it. Confusion. Thousands of human memories suddenly flashed through the hive consciousness at once as it tried reading deeper into his mind. Disasters. Starvation. Nuclear fire. Humans fighting each other across ruined worlds. Humans surviving impossible conditions again and again. The organism recoiled slightly. You destroy yourselves, yet continue. Elias realized then why Reyes said humanity frightened it. Every species the organism consumed probably broke under fear eventually. Humanity didn't. Humans adapted to terror, lived with it, weaponized it. Dane hurled explosives into the advancing swarm. Commander, we need a plan right now. Elias looked toward the crater core pulsing far below. Then toward the damaged colonial railgun near the barricade. An idea formed instantly. Kai, can you overload that railgun reactor? The android tore a creature's head apart before answering. Yes. Yield would be sufficient to collapse the crater. Mira understood immediately. You're going to bury the whole organism. Or vaporize it trying. The ground shook violently. A gigantic shape began rising from the abyss itself. Not another creature. The original body. It emerged slowly from darkness beneath the crater, towering hundreds of meters high like a living mountain of black flesh and fused human remains. Faces moved beneath its surface constantly, screaming silently while opening and closing empty mouths. The organism finally stopped pretending to understand humanity. Now it simply wanted them dead. The cavern erupted with psychic pressure so strong blood streamed from Myra's nose instantly. You cannot kill us. The massive entity lunged upward. Entire barricades vanished beneath enormous tendrils crashing through steel and stone alike. Dane barely rolled aside before one smashed the ground where he stood. Ki sprinted toward the damaged railgun reactor while Elias and the others covered him desperately. Creatures swarmed everywhere now. Too many. Mira screamed as one tackled her from behind. Its face shifted rapidly between people she recognized while claws wrapped around her throat. Her father. Her brother. Her own reflection. "Stop fighting," it whispered using her voice. Dane blasted it apart before it could bite her. "Get up." Kai reached the railgun reactor. Then stopped. The android looked back toward Elias. "Manual detonation required." Silence hit for half a second, because everyone understood immediately what that meant. Someone had to stay behind. The organism surged closer through the crater while the cavern collapsed around them. Elias made his decision instantly. "I'll do it." Mira grabbed his arm violently. "No. You know there's no other way." Another massive impact split the cavern floor nearby. The creature was almost upon them now. Ki's damaged synthetic voice interrupted softly. "Commander, human survival probability increases by 43% if you evacuate immediately." Elias frowned. "What are you saying?" The android looked toward the reactor core. "I was created for hostile environment operations." Realization hit them all at once. Dane stepped forward. "Kai, my systems are already compromised," the android continued calmly. "You are not." The organism roared through every human mind in the cavern as though sensing what was happening. Tendrils surged toward the reactor platform. Kai looked at Elias one final time. "You taught me humanity is defined not by survival." The android loaded the reactor manually, but by what it chooses to protect. Then he sealed the blast doors between himself and the others. Elias slammed both fists against the blast door. "Kai." The android stood motionless on the other side of the thick steel barrier while warning lights flashed crimson across the collapsing cavern. Behind him, the massive reactor core began overloading, energy building rapidly inside cracked containment chambers. The organism understood the danger immediately. Every creature in the cavern turned toward Kai at once. Thousands of black bodies surged across the crater. Kai raised his rifle calmly. "Go." Then the swarm hit him. Elias dragged Mira backward as Dane forced open an emergency tunnel behind the barricades. The entire cavern shook violently now. Massive chunks of rock collapsed into the abyss while the organism screamed directly into their minds with enough force to blur vision. "Not again." The words hit Elias like ice. Not again. This thing had lost before. Somewhere in the distant past another species had wounded it badly enough to leave it trapped beneath LV-426 for thousands of years. But humanity would finish the job. The team sprinted through collapsing tunnels while alarms screamed around them. Behind them came constant explosions, gunfire, and the horrifying sound of the organism tearing through steel. Then Ki's voice crackled weakly over comms. "Detonation sequence active. Static. 40 seconds. Mira stumbled as another psychic wave slammed through her mind. Images flooded her thoughts rapidly now. Earth burning. Human ships drifting empty through dead stars. The organism was desperate, trying to break them before the end. Dane pulled her forward. "Move." The tunnel ahead split apart as shockwaves thundered through the underground complex. Boiling steam erupted from ruptured pipes while black organic veins covering the walls began dying around them, shriveling into ash. It was working. The organism was weakening. Then the whispers started again. Not from the walls. From above. Human voices echoed through the tunnels ahead. "Help us. We're alive. Please don't leave." Elias slowed immediately. Survivors? The organism was still trying to trap them. But then he heard one voice that froze him completely. "Commander." The voice sounded damaged. Painfully human. "I'm still operational." Mira grabbed Elias before he could turn around. "Don't." "But if he survived." "He didn't." Her eyes were filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "That thing is inside our heads." The tunnel lights flickered. Ki's voice returned from the darkness ahead. You don't abandon your own. Dane cursed quietly. It learns fast. The voice changed. Now it sounded exactly like Elias himself. You know he's still alive. Elias felt his feet stop moving again. For half a second doubt entered his mind. And the organism sensed it instantly. The tunnel ahead shifted. The darkness formed into shapes. Human silhouettes emerged slowly from shadows lining the corridor. Dozens of them. Every member of Theta Station's crew. Standing silently shoulder to shoulder. Watching. Their eyes turned black simultaneously. Then they charged. The team opened fire instantly. Pulse rounds ripped through bodies, filling the tunnel with black fluid and shredded flesh. But the creatures kept coming even while dismembered. One missing half its face still sprinted forward, screaming with 3 overlapping human voices. Dane shoved Elias toward the elevator shaft ahead. Go! The old industrial lift still hung near the surface access tunnel. Their only escape. Mira activated the controls frantically while the swarm closed behind them. Come on. Nothing happened. Power failure. The organism laughed through hundreds of human mouths behind them. You cannot escape yourselves. The surviving creatures stopped advancing suddenly. Instead they began changing. Bodies twisted violently. Bones cracked. Skin split apart. The copies no longer cared about appearing human. They became something worse. Towering black forms unfolded in the tunnel with massive limbs and eyeless heads splitting open into rows of rotating teeth. The confined space filled with clicking sounds like giant insects communicating. Dane stared at them in disbelief. Those aren't the same creatures. Ki's final words echoed in Elias' mind. Humanity is defined by what it chooses to protect. Elias looked upward toward the maintenance cables running beside the elevator shaft. Then toward the overloaded power conduits above the tunnel. An idea formed instantly. Mira, can you reroute emergency power? She understood immediately. Yes, but only for a few seconds. That's enough. The first monster lunged. Dane unloaded his entire rifle into it while Elias climbed the maintenance ladder beside the shaft. Sparks exploded around him as creatures swarmed upward below. Mira forced open an exposed power panel near the lift controls. Ready? Now. Emergency power surged through the system. The elevator roared back to life above them. At the same moment, Elias ripped loose the primary power conduit beside the shaft. 30,000 volts erupted downward through the flooded tunnel. The explosion of light blinded everything. Creatures convulsed violently as electricity surged through black organic matter covering the walls. The entire shaft became an inferno of sparks and burning flesh. The organism screamed. Not through voices this time. For the first time, Elias heard its real sound. Ancient. Alien. Terrified. The lift finally dropped into position. Dane practically threw Mira inside before climbing after her. Elias jumped aboard seconds before the tunnel beneath them collapsed completely under fire and electricity. The elevator shot upward toward the surface. Below them, the underground world died. Shockwaves thundered upward through the shaft as KAI's reactor finally reached critical overload. Then the planet exploded beneath them. A white wall of fire erupted through the depths, vaporizing tunnels, creatures, and the massive hive intelligence in one catastrophic chain. Reaction. The blast wave hurled the elevator upward violently. Metal screamed. Cables snapped. The lift rocketed through the surface station and burst into the rain-soaked streets of the colony just as the ground behind them collapsed inward. Entire city blocks vanished into growing craters. The organism was dying, and it was taking the colony with it. Elias, Mira, and Dane ran through collapsing streets while the planet literally tore itself apart around them. Towers folded sideways into flaming sinkholes. Black veins covering buildings shriveled and dissolved like burning paper. Above the storm clouds, Theta Station appeared in the sky. Still waiting. Still infected. Mira realized it first. The station. Elias stopped cold. If the organism had already reached Theta, then escape would spread the infection farther. Humanity itself would be at risk. Thunder rolled overhead while the colony collapsed around them. Then a transmission crackled across emergency frequencies. Static filled the signal. After several seconds, a familiar voice spoke weakly. 7. Commander Ward. All three froze. Impossible. The voice crackled again. Station defense systems activated. Heavy static followed. No vessels leaving orbit. Mira covered her mouth. KAI had survived long enough to reach Theta's systems remotely before the detonation. The android had locked the station down, containing the infection. Elias looked upward toward the burning sky. Kai. The response came softer now. Almost gone. You said, humans never leave their own behind. Static consumed the transmission. Then silence forever. The survivors reached the dropship moments before the colony finally began sinking into itself completely. Elias launched the ship through collapsing skies while firestorms erupted across LV-426 beneath them. As they climbed toward orbit, they saw Theta Station burning. Sections of the massive structure vented atmosphere into space while internal explosions spread deck by deck. Whatever infected crew remained aboard was being erased along with the station itself. A final sacrifice. The dropship accelerated away from the planet as the station detonated behind them in a silent storm of white fire. For several long minutes nobody spoke. Only breathing filled the cockpit. Then Mira finally whispered the question none of them could escape. Do you think it's really over? Elias stared at the burning remains of LV-426 disappearing behind them. He remembered the organism's fear. Not fear of weapons. Not fear of death. Fear of humanity itself. A species too stubborn to surrender. Too violent to break. Too willing to sacrifice everything just to deny monsters victory. He finally answered quietly. It is now. Far behind the escaping dropship, the ruins of the dead world burned silently in darkness. And for the first time in 200 years, the voices were gone. Long after official reports buried the incident beneath military classifications and erased every record of LV-426 from public networks, one detail continued spreading quietly through human space. Not through governments. Not through the military. Through survivors. Freighter crews whispered about it in deep space ports. Marines repeated it before deployment into hostile systems. Explorers carved it into the hulls of ships entering uncharted regions. A warning. And a promise. Because the final transmission recovered from Theta Station had not come from Commander Elias Ward. It came from the dying hive intelligence itself. The message lasted only 4 seconds before the station exploded. For seconds that changed humanity forever. Do not let them find us again. Alien civilizations later spent decades trying to understand why those words terrified human intelligence agencies so much. They never received an answer. Because humanity understood something the rest of the galaxy did not. The organism beneath LV-426 had not been unique. It had been running from something even worse. And during its final moments, after consuming countless civilizations across thousands of years, after surviving extinction itself, after learning the fears of entire species, it had looked into the human mind and discovered something that frightened it more than death. Humans were not prey. Humans were the species insane enough to follow monsters into the dark. No matter how deep the abyss opened. No matter what waited inside. Humanity would descend willingly if it meant protecting their own. And somewhere beyond mapped space, hidden in ancient black regions where stars no longer gave light, something heard the silence left behind after LV-426 died. Something old. Something waiting. But it did not move toward Earth. Because even horrors learned to fear what humanity becomes when survival is no longer enough. Especially when humans are angry.